The sea mist lay thick around Dragonstone, a gray curtain clinging to jagged cliffs and black stone towers, as if the island itself were reluctant to let the day begin. From the Queen's solar, the world was little more than moving shadows. The restless sea, the shifting veil of fog, the ghostly shapes of ships at anchor below. Rhaenyra Targaryen stood at the narrow window, one hand braced on the cold stone, the other resting against the slight swell of her belly, as if instinct could protect the life within from the cruel turnings of the world. Behind her, the chamber was warm with braziers and heavy with the scent of burning cedar. The crackle of flames and the distant crash of waves were familiar comforts, but they did not ease the knot of dread that had taken residence in her chest. "You are restless," whispered a voice like the sea breaking on pebbles. Rhaenyra did not turn. "I am queen of a kingdom that hates me, with half my children dead and the other half hunted." Restless is a mild word for such things. Mysaria, the white worm, leaned her slight frame against a carved pillar, pale as moonlight in her loose, gray gown. The woman had come to Dragonstone under cover of fog and bribery, bearing secrets on her tongue instead of contraband in her hands. She had once sold information to Rhaenyra's enemies. Now she sold it to the Queen, though Rhaenyra suspected it was not gold alone that bound her. "Word travels quickly in a city of rats and ravens," Mysaria said. "Even when that city is leagues away, your enemies stir still. They whisper that the tide has turned, that the Queen is cornered on her rock." Rhaenyra closed her eyes. She could almost hear the bells of King's Landing tolling, could smell the dragon pit's charred stone, could see the burned corpses of small folk who had tried to slay dragons with pitchforks and stones and broken swords. She had been there when King's Landing knelt to her, when the Iron Throne cut her hand and drew her blood, accepting her as its rightful mistress. For a fleeting moment, it had seemed the war was done. Then the food had run short, the dragons had turned on each other. The city had soured, and somewhere in the chaos, her cause had begun to rot. "Let them whisper," she said. "They have whispered all my life. My father named me his heir before all the realm. I sat at his side in council. I flew Syrax above this very sea when I was barely grown. I am not cornered, not while I still draw breath and my banners still fly." "Banners burn," Mysaria said softly. "Breath leaves the body. I saw shoulders hunch in King's Landing when the news came that your boy, that Lucerys, fell from the sky at Storm's End. I heard children repeat it in alleyways, as if it were a tale from some cruel singer. Men are ready to believe you cursed, even when it is their own lords who bring curses upon them." Rhaenyra's fingers tightened against the stone. Lucerys, with his shy smile and salt-tangled hair, had been the first to die. Jacaerys had followed, falling in the raging sky over the god's eye. Harwin, Rhaenyra, Demon, ghosts, all ghosts now, walking behind her footsteps. A queen in black, with ghosts at her heels. "Tell me why you came," she said, "and do not circle around the truth like a gull over a dead fish." Mysaria's eyes were pale as frost. "Very well. I have word of Aegon." The name chilled the room more than any sea breeze. Rhaenyra turned at last, her silver gold hair loose and wild around her sharp features, eyes like molten metal. "He should be half-rotten by now," she said. "Unless the stranger has been lazy." "The small folk say he lives," Mysaria said. "They say a king walked with a limp through the Red Keep halls, shining golden from head to toe. They say he holds court in the Iron Throne room, gatherings of lickspittles and cowards at his feet." "Drunkards' tales," Rhaenyra snapped, but doubt gnawed. Aegon's death had been too convenient, too timely. Poison in wine, they'd said, a cup that never reached his lips in her sight. A corpse glimpsed at a distance, wrapped in gold cloth, paraded through streets filled with riot and fear. She had wanted to see the body herself, to put her hand against his cooling brow and know. The realm had not given her that mercy. "You once paid handsomely for drunks' tales," Mysaria said, "when they led to truths you wanted." Rhaenyra crossed the room, each step measured. "Say what you mean." "I mean he comes," Mysaria said simply, "not as a ghost but as flesh. A fleet sails from King's Landing under Lannister lions and Hightower towers. In their holds ride knights clad in green, and men loyal still to your usurper brother. Their king, their golden king, sails upon a ship called the Sunfire's Grace. Rhaenyra's breath stopped. You are certain? I have men in White Harbor, Gulltown, and King's Landing both, Mysaria said. Ships do not move in silence. Ravens can be intercepted. Coin can loosen tongues. This fleet is not rumor. Cuts through the narrow sea even now. They mean to strike Dragonstone while the realm believes you secure. Then mount your skull upon a spike as proof your cause is ash. Rhaenyra's hand went again to her belly. Inside, the child shifted, a faint flutter. Her jaw clenched. No more children would die for Aegon's pride. No more of hers. How many ships? She asked. Enough that I would not wish to count them from the shore, Mysaria said. But ships are wood and sail, and wood may burn. You have dragons still. Not enough, Rhaenyra thought. Not anymore. Syrax still lived, glorious and fierce, but old and heavy with years. Vermax, Eryx, Malays, Caraxes, Vagard, dead, dead, dead. The dance of dragons had left a charred ruin where once there had been a menagerie of fire. I have dragons, Rhaenyra said, but not like before. You have more than he does, Mysaria answered. Sunfire is broken, half crippled. The dragon he brings can barely fly, if the tales be true. Tales a guy. Rhaenyra murmured. Always tales. She looked back toward the fog-drowned sea. Somewhere out there, beyond the Veil of Grey, the last act of her war approached. Fate, in the shape of sails and steel, came to write a final line under the thing her father's peace had become. Send riders, she said. Wake every man-at-arms, every archer, every boy old enough to hold a spear. Have Ser Alfred Broom muster the garrison. Have the Valerian fleet ready to sail. I want my banners flying from every tower. And the dragons? Mysaria asked. Rhaenyra drew a long breath. Have the dragon keepers ready Syrax, and send for Nettles and Sheepstealer, if she is still within reach. I will not wait here for Aegon to smash his way through my gates. Mysaria inclined her head. So the dance comes to its last steps. Rhaenyra looked at her. No, she said, not its last, only its cruelest. I do not mean this to end in ashes. Not yet. Mysaria gazed at her curiously, as if measuring something no scale could weigh. Then perhaps you will need more than fire this time, she said. Fire has taken so much from you already. Fire is what we are, Rhaenyra said, but the words felt thinner than they once had. Go, tell Corlys Valerian what you have told me. No more secrets between us. When Mysaria had gone, the queen stood alone for a moment longer, listening to the waves. Somewhere far below, in the great caverns under Dragonstone, she could feel Syrax stirring in her mind. The warm, fierce presence of the dragon like a banked ember, roused by the scent of war. We cannot run, Rhaenyra thought. Not again. Not from him. If Aegon wants to end this, let him come to my sky. She left the window and went to don her armor. The breastplate was black steel chased with gold, the same she had worn when she rode into King's Landing triumphant. She remembered how the crowd had looked then. A sea of faces upturned, some with awe, some with resentment, some with naked hatred. She had ridden past them with her jaw set and her eyes fixed on the Red Keep, telling herself that victory would quiet their fears, that justice would soothe their anger. She had been wrong, she knew now. Victory alone did not heal. Justice alone did not feed bellies or rebuild burned homes. Perhaps that had been her father's lesson too, though he had never spoken it aloud. As her squires fastened the clasps and buckles, as her maids drew her hair back and bound it in a warrior's braid, Rhaenyra felt each layer not as protection but as weight. The weight of her house, her father's crown, her son's ghosts. She bore it anyway. Aegon thought her cornered, Mysaria had said. Let him think it. Let him sail toward this rock with his gilded banners and hungry knights. The sea might yet swallow him. Dragons might burn him. or something else, something neither of them had used enough words. She would not tell her council that last thought. Not yet. They still believed in dragons more than in law. The drums sounded through Dragonstone before noon, deep and rolling. From the battlements, horns answered, and the bells of the castle sept took up their own wild chant. Men ran, armor clanked, the clatter of boots and shouted orders rising in a fevered tide. The Valerian banners, silver seahorse on sea green, snapped in a rising wind beside the red three-headed dragon of House Targaryen. Rhaenyra strode into the yard where Syrax waited, the dragon's golden scales dull in the mist, great wings folded close. Syrax's eyes glowed with inner fire as she lowered her head, breathing out a gust of hot air that fluttered the queen's cloak. "My girl," Rhaenyra whispered, resting a hand against the dragon's snout. For a heartbeat, she was young again, a princess laughing atop Syrax's back as they looped above the Blackwater Bay, her father's hand raised in delight below. One more flight. The dragon's mind met hers, a familiar rush of heat and hunger and sky. Not words, never words, but a fierce sense of togetherness. "We, not you, not I, we." The dragon keepers stood well back, eyes wide. Most were boys now, the old men having died in the pits of King's Landing or beneath falling stones. They had seen too much fire for their years. "Open the gates," Rhaenyra called. "When the enemy fleet is within sight of the island, raise the signal." Ser Alfred Broom frowned up at her. "You mean to face them alone, your grace?" "I am never alone," she said, and patted Syrax's neck. "And I do not mean to meet their ships at sea. I mean to meet their dragon." The mists thinned as the day wore on, the gray veil lifting by slow degrees to reveal streaks of pale sky. Ravens flew out from Dragonstone's rookery, winging toward Driftmark and other loyal holds. The Valerian fleet began to slip its moorings, oars biting the churning water with steady rhythm. Rhaenyra waited in the air. Syrax took wing with a thunder of beating membranes, wind whirling around them as they rose above the towers. The island shrank beneath, a black stone claw clutching at the sea, ringed with white foam. The wind tore at Rhaenyra's hair and cloak, sharp and salt-bright. For all the years and the grief, flight still made something loosen in her chest. Up here, the war seemed smaller. The lines on her palm might as well have been the coasts of Westeros. Men and their schemes were tiny scratchings beneath the open sky. She circled once, twice, scanning the horizon. At first, there was nothing but endless water. Then, like a bruise spreading on the skin of the sea, she saw them, the dark smudges of sails, resolving into a formation of warships. Banners flew at their masts. The green dragon of Aegon II, the golden lion of Lannister, the white rose of Tyrell, the high tower, and others. And at the heart of them all, glittering faintly even from distance, a shape like a hunched mountain of gold, Sunfire. Rhaenyra's teeth clenched. The dragon's wings looked ragged, one half folded, the other beating unevenly. Scars twisted across its back, puckered and pale. Yet its presence was still a wound in the world, a burn that had not healed. The last time she had seen Sunfire, it had been arcing across the sky of Rook's Rest, blazing and beautiful and deadly, tearing flesh and bone from malaise with its jaws. Her Aunt Rhaenys had fallen that day, red hair and crimson scales tumbling together from the heights. A part of Rhaenyra had fallen with them. "Easy," she whispered to Syrax. "Easy, girl. We will not rush him. Not this time." As she watched, a thin plume of smoke rose from Sunfire's maw. Rhaenyra remembered the tales. The dragon broken in battles since, struggling to fly, half-lamed. Yet there he was, borne upon a wide-decked ship like a god carved from burnished metal. If Aegon was on the sea, he would be on that ship. She guided Syrax higher, into the cloud-scattered blue, until the wind grew colder and the world below seemed painted on glass. From here, she could fall upon the enemy like a spear of lightning. She could turn their sails to torches, their decks to funeral pyres. She could end this war in a single blazing stroke. But the vision that rose in her mind unbidden was not of the ships burning. It was of the charred bones at the dragon pit, small and large alike, of children's faces streaked with soot and terror as stones fell and dragons screamed. She remembered the hungry eyes that had watched her progress through King's Landing streets, the bitter mutters of men who had lost sons to both sides. If she burned this fleet, she would kill more than Aegon's loyalists. There would be sailors pressed into service, boys who had never seen a dragon up close. There would be cooks and squires, and men who had never lifted a sword out of love for any king, only fear. Fire has taken so much from you already, Mysaria had said. Rhaenyra's gloved hand tightened on Syrax's reins. We will not burn them all, she murmured. Not if there is another way. But what other way was there, up here in the cold blue emptiness, with only dragons between realms? A horn sounded from the lead ship, a faint braying carried thinly by the wind. From the golden shape upon the Sunfire's grace, another answered, deeper and more resonant. The dragon's roar followed, warped but still enough to raise gooseflesh along Rhaenyra's arms. All right, she whispered. We will speak then. She had spoken with dragons all her life. Now she would speak with the man who had called himself king on a stolen throne. Rhaenyra guided Syrax into a long, slow descent, spiraling down toward the fleet. Shouts carried upward, tiny, desperate. Some of the enemy ships began to break formation, trying to scatter. Others held their course grimly, trusting in their dragon. She made straight for the Sunfire's grace. The golden dragon shifted, uneasy. Rhaenyra could feel its agitation through Syrax, the way their roars tangled in the air. Men scrambled on the deck below, shields raised. At the prow, a figure in shining armor stood rigid, cloak snapping around him like a green flame. Aegon. She recognized him even from above. The set of his shoulders, the cruel line of his mouth beneath a beard he had not worn when last they faced each other. His crown glinted, a circlet of golden swords that mocked the iron monstrosity in the Red Keep. Rhaenyra did not let Syrax scream a challenge. She had no interest in giving any man the satisfaction of thinking this another mindless clash of beasts. She brought her dragon to a hover, wings beating powerfully, the air churning in a storm of wind and spray around them. Brother, she called, voice carried by the wind. Aegon, look up. The man at the prow raised his head. She saw the moment he recognized her, saw the shock, then fury. He lifted a hand. The men around him scrambled to arm the scorpions mounted along the gunnels. Someone shouted, pointing. Arrows knocked, bolts ratcheted into place. Hold, Rhaenyra commanded Syrax, feeling the dragon's muscles bunch beneath her thighs. No flame, Syrax hissed, but obeyed. Your grace, they mean to, called a rider behind her. But Rhaenyra had not brought any other dragons. There was only the wind and the sea and the two of them, as it had always been in truth. Aegon, she shouted again. Do you mean to kill me here on the open sea where all can see? Do you mean to roast your sister on the deck of a ship and let the story spread from Gulltown to the Arbor? He stepped forward, so close to the prow now that a sudden wave might have doused his boots. His voice came up roughened by distance. I mean to end a traitor, he shouted back, and take back what was stolen from me. Rhaenyra laughed, a short, sharp sound flung into the wind. Stolen? You claim theft for what was given me by our father's own hand? By the lords of the realm that bent knee to my claim? You are the thief, Aegon. You always were. Men bend knee to strength, he said, not to parchments and pretty words. You lost their love. You lost their trust. You lost their dragons. What kind of queen are you now? A queen of cinders. The words pricked. They were not wholly false. She felt the keen edge of them and did not flinch. And you? She called. What kind of king hides behind Lannister gold and Hightower schemes, sending others to fight and die while he swills wine in his tower? You speak of hiding while you cower on your rock, he said. You lost King's Landing. You fled it like a beaten dog. I have come to finish what you began. Arrows twitched on their strings. Men shifted nervously. Sunfire's eyes fixed on Syrax with something like recognition. something like hate. "Brother," Rhaenyra said, and for a moment her voice dropped the ring of command. "Look where we stand. Look what we have done." She flung a hand wide, encompassing the horizon, the scattered ships, the churning sea. "Once our house ruled a kingdom at peace," she said. "Once dragons filled the sky like storm clouds. We had no enemies, we did not birth ourselves. Then they pitted you against me and we danced to their tune, and now look. How many dragons remain? How many sons? How many fathers? How many small folk lie in unmarked graves because of us?" "You began it," Aegon snarled. "You flouted our father's wishes. You brought bastards to court and called them princes. You let that whore of Harwin Strong seed you and then dared to present his get as Valerians and Targaryens both. You made a mockery of us." Heat flared in her cheeks, a rage she had carried since Alicent's green gown first swirled through King's Landing halls. "Our father's wishes," she said. "He named me his heir. He had witnesses. He banished any who dared speak against my claim. And those boys were mine, and I loved them, and they were worth 10 of you, drunk or sober. But this is not about them. This has never been about the truth. Only power. Truth matters," Aegon said. "Our house is built on truth. Fire and blood and dragon stock. Our house is built on conquest and fear," Rhaenyra said, and the admission felt like swallowing a blade. "And it will fall on the same if we do not change. Look at your fleet, Aegon. Half these lords fought for you out of fear of the Hightower's wrath or hope of Lannister gold. The rest followed you because they hated me more. If you win here, what then? You limp back to King's Landing on your crippled dragon and sit again on Father's throne, presiding over a ruin. And the next time you falter, they will find another to set against you. Another us." Her voice carried over the water like a knife. Men shifted uncertainly on the decks of the nearest ships, glancing at one another as if wondering whether they were hearing treason or truth. "You speak as if you have some other road," Aegon said. "You do not. You send dragons, I send dragons. You have burned as much of this realm as I have." "More," she said quietly. "Perhaps more. I do not deny it. I brought war to our father's peace because I demanded what was mine. I would do it again. But I have learned, Aegon. Have you? When I took King's Landing, I thought victory enough. I thought the city's hunger and fear would quiet when my banners flew above the Red Keep. Instead, they starved. They hated. They rose against me, against dragons themselves. We lost more in that madness than we did in 10 pitched battles. Crying over small folk now?" he said. "Is this what queenship has made of you?" "It has made of me something I never thought I would be," she said. "A woman who understands that dragons alone cannot rule, that fear alone cannot bind a realm. If we burn you here, the Hightowers will not forget. The Lannisters will not forget. The Reach, the Westerlands, Old Town. They will remember fire, and they will wait for a chance to break us once and for all. We will win this war and lose the next." "And your answer?" Aegon demanded. "That we embrace? Share Father's chair like a stool in a tavern? There are no half-kings, Rhaenyra. Only rulers and corpses." In another life, she might have believed that. In this life, she looked down at him, at the ragged, proud fool in shining gold who had once been a sulky boy skulking through the Red Keep, stealing wine and avoiding his duties. "I will offer you what you never offered me," she said. "An end." A hush fell on the ships nearest, as if the sea itself were holding its breath. "You will disarm your fleet and stand down your banners," Rhaenyra said. "You will come to Dragonstone with a small retinue only, no more than 100 knights, unarmored and unarmed at the gate. There, before the heart of our house, you will bend the knee and renounce your claim before those who once swore to me and betrayed me. You will confess that you usurped what was mine by law and by your own oath. You will yield, Aegon, and in return I will spare you." His laugh was harsh. "Spare me? To what? A comfortable tower in some forgotten holdfast? A prison of silk, with maids to wipe my drool and guards to watch while I rot? You will live," she said. "You will take the black The Night's Watch is hungry for men with swords, even broken swords. You will never marry, never hold lands or father lawful heirs, never ride your dragon again. Your name will be cursed in song and praised by those who need a sword at the wall. You will vanish from the game you were never suited to play, and the realm will have peace. A murmur rose on the ships below, loud enough to carry. Aegon's shoulders bunched. You mock me, he said. I offer you life, she replied, because if you refuse, you will die here. She leaned forward slightly in the saddle, hand resting on Syrax's warm neck. Look at me, Aegon, she said softly. I am not the girl you tried to steal a throne from. I have lost sons, lovers, kin. I have sat in rooms where the walls dripped blood. I have watched dragons die and cities burn. There is very little left in me that fears your wrath. But there is something that fears what we are doing to our house, to father's legacy. I will not be remembered as the queen who burned the last of our dragons in a fit of pride. She let the words hang there, then drove the point home. Yield, and I will build something from these ashes, she said. Refuse, and I will end you, not with joy, but with certainty. There will be no songs of mercy then, only smoke. For a heartbeat, she thought he might fling himself onto Sunfire's back and launch upward, shouting for Dragonfire. His hand went to the hilt of his sword. His jaw clenched. Then, from somewhere behind him on the deck, a new voice spoke. My king, it said, carrying across the water with the crisp diction of Old Town's halls. She has the advantage. To fight here is folly. We should withdraw and choose our ground better. Rhaenyra recognized the speaker. Ser Gawain Hightower, lean and hawk-faced, his surcoat emblazoned with the tower and flame. Otto's Biel. Withdraw, Aegon spat. And skulk back to King's Landing with our tails between our legs? After I promised them her head. You promised them a victory, Gawain said. This is not it. The dragons are unpredictable. Before Aegon could turn his fury on his own man, another voice, older, graver, came from further back. Your Grace, it called. The Queen offers terms. Harsh for one in your position, perhaps, but life remains life. A dead king rules no one. Lord Jason Lannister, Rhaenyra thought, squinting. The lion had grown grayer since she last saw him, but his arrogance rode his shoulders still. That he would counsel caution surprised her. Aegon whipped around, cloak flaring. Lannister cowardice, he said. I should have expected no less from a man who hid behind his gold while others bled. Others bled because they were fools, Jason replied calmly. Your Grace, the realm is broken. The Reach burns, the Riverlands are a graveyard. King's Landing seethes still. If we can end this without burning the last shreds of order, we should consider it. Times like these make even old lions cautious. Men looked between them, between the king and his great lord, between the queen in the sky and the dragon on deck. The wind carried their unease like a smell. You would have me crawl to her? Aegon shouted. You would have me cast aside my crown and chain myself to some frozen wall at the world's edge like a common criminal? If you do not, you may end at the bottom of this sea, Jason said. Your Grace, forgive bluntness. We do not win this battle. Not like this. Listen to them, brother, Rhaenyra called down. For once, you have listened all your life to flatterers and liars. Here they finally speak a truth. Aegon looked up at her again. His eyes, once a dull, discontented violet, burned now with a wild, cornered light. You think you can unmake me with words, he said. You think you can turn my own lords against me. You forget, sister. I still have something you do not. He raised one hand high, fingers spread. Dracarys, he screamed. Sunfire lurched, a great shudder passing through his twisted body. For a heartbeat, it seemed the golden dragon would not answer. Then flames erupted from his maw, a torrent of searing gold-white fire that spilled toward the sky. But the fire did not leap at Syrax. It leapt at the scorpions. Rhaenyra flinched back in the saddle, blinking through the sudden glare. When her sight cleared, She saw that the deck was a chaos of smoke and shouting men. The scorpions mounted along the ship's sides blazed, their wooden frames cracking and splintering in the heat. Men dropped their bolts, shields raised instinctively against a dragon's wrath. "What are you doing?" Gwaine Hightower shouted, coughing. Aegon lowered his hand slowly. When he looked up at Rhaenyra again, the wildness in his eyes had shifted. He looked like a man who had leapt from a height and only now realized how far he might fall. "Burning my bridges," he called hoarsely, "so I cannot march back across them and pretend this never happened." He gestured at the ruined siege engines, at the scorched planks underfoot. "The old men would have me withdraw," he said. "Fight another day, lose more dragons, more men, more sons I do not know the names of. So the next time we speak, it is over the smoking bones of King's Landing itself." He took a breath that seemed to cost him. "You want me to yield," he said, "to confess, to take the black." Rhaenyra held his gaze. "Yes. Before who?" he asked. "Your lickspittle lords? The ones who turned cloak twice already? Your dragons? The small folk who hate us both? Before all of them," she said, "let them see you kneel. Let them hear you call me queen, so that when some other fool whispers of splitting the realm again, they remember this day and think twice." He looked down at his hand, at the faint tremor in his fingers. Sunfire shifted restlessly beneath him, scars pulling tight over warped muscle. The dragon's wings flexed, half spread, then folded again with visible effort. "Sunfire is dying," Aegon said abruptly. "The maesters say he will not see 3 years. They do not know dragons, but I can feel it. Each flight is pain. Each breath is labor. He would burn this fleet to cinders for me if I asked it. He would die in the doing, and I am not sure I want to die with him." He looked up once more, and for the first time since she had seen him crowned in her place, he was simply her brother. A flawed, frightened man clad in borrowed glory. "You will swear, before gods and men, never to harm my children," he said. "Not those birthed in wedlock nor out of it. You will let them live their lives unhunted. You will not treat them as I treated yours. Swear it, Rhaenyra. Swear it on father's name." "I swear," she said, the words hard and heavy. "On Viserys Targaryen, on my blood, on the Seven and the old gods both, if they will have me, your children will live. I will not seek their blood." He laughed, a rattle edged with something like relief. "You always did like to collect gods," he said. "Very well then, sister. Send your ravens. Tell the world. Aegon the Elder yields." He tore the golden crown from his head and hurled it onto the deck. A murmur went up from the surrounding ships, a ripple of disbelief and fury and, in some unmistakable hope. Rhaenyra closed her eyes for a moment. Somewhere deep in her, a knot she had carried since that first council in the Red Keep loosened. Not entirely, just enough to draw a deeper breath. "Come to Dragonstone," she said. "Bring only those you trust not to slit your throat in the dark and blame me. We will end this there." She wheeled Syrax in the air, the dragon turning with a beat of powerful wings, and began the flight back to the black rock in the sea. Behind her, the war's last fleet drifted in stunned silence, banners sagging in uncertain wind. Below her, far beneath the clouds, Rhaenyra Targaryen began to imagine a future that was not written in Dragonflame. It was a strange thing, ending a war. The ravens flew ahead of Aegon's stripped-down fleet, bearing the news like a storm rolling over Westeros. Lords who had raised their banners for green or black now sat in their halls and read the short, terse words with disbelief. "To all lords of the Seven Kingdoms, let it be known that Aegon called II, styling himself king, has yielded his claim to the Iron Throne, bent knee to his rightful queen, and sworn to take the black. Let all swords be laid down. Let all banners be furled. By my word as Rhaenyra of House Targaryen, first of her name, Queen of the Undulls, the Rhaenyra, and the First Men, Lady of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm, the dance of the dragons is ended. Some called it a trick. Some called it madness. Some called it the first sensible thing the Dragon Lords had done in years. On Dragonstone, the mood was no less fraught. Rhaenyra's Black Council gathered in the Great Hall, faces lined by exhaustion and suspicion. Corlys Velaryon sat with his great hands clasped, sea salt in the lines of his knuckles. Lord Bartimos Celtigar's eyes glittered with sharp, crab-like interest. Ser Alfred Brune glowered openly, fingers drumming on his sword pommel. "You cannot trust him," Alfred said for the third time. "He will arrive with swords hidden. He will stab you as you embrace. This is the boy who climbed onto the throne while you were birthing and called himself king." "He is not a boy anymore," Corlys said. "He is a man with a broken dragon and a broken realm. Men like that make strange choices. Strange choices get queens killed," Alfred snapped. "We should have flown at them when they were still at sea. A single pass from Syrax would have lit those ships like kindling." "And killed how many men forced into service?" Rhaenyra asked quietly. "How many boys from the Reach or the Westerlands who never saw a dragon before now? Must they die for Aegon's pride?" "They chose to sail beneath his banners," Alfred said. "They went where their lords pointed them," Rhaenyra replied, "as they would have sailed beneath mine, had their fathers sworn differently when I was 9 years old. I will not heap more corpses on this pyre if I can help it." Lord Celtigar leaned forward. "Words are wind, your grace. Aegon may say anything with Sunfire still alive beneath him. We have lost too much to gamble now." "He burned his own scorpions," Rhaenyra said. "He stripped his fleet of its dragon-killing teeth. That was not the act of a man intent on treachery. Or it was the act of a man who knows his only hope is to lull you," Celtigar countered. "Put him to the sword now on the water, and let the sea take his lies." Corlys cleared his throat. "She did not," he pointed out. "And whether we like it or not, the ravens have flown. Lords will be watching. If word comes that Aegon sailed under terms of peace and died in Dragonflame anyway, the queen will look no better than a butcher. Her rule will begin with broken oaths." "We have broken so many already," Alfred muttered. Rhaenyra's patience thinned. "Enough," she said, the word cracking like a whip. The hall fell silent. She rose from the high seat at the end of the table, moving down among them until she stood close enough to see the weariness in their eyes, to smell stale sweat and old wine. These were the men who had watched her sons die, who had sent their own kin into deadly skies. They were not cowards. They were simply afraid of a different world than the one they knew. "You counsel fire because fire is what we have always used," she said. "My grandsire conquered with Dragonflame. My father ruled with its shadow behind him even as he let his counsels rot. You assumed I would rule the same. I assumed I would rule the same." She looked from face to face, lingering on Corlys' thoughtful gaze. "We were wrong," she said. "We cannot go back to what we were. There is not enough of us left. Not enough dragons. Not enough trust." Celtigar sniffed. "Trust is a poor shield. Fear is a poorer one," Rhaenyra said. "Fear breaks the moment a man sees you bleed. I would have us build something stronger. Call it what you like. Law, custom, the habit of not slaughtering one another every time a king coughs." "Words," Alfred muttered again, but uncertainly. Rhaenyra fixed him with a leveled stare. "Words end wars," she said. "Swords merely decide how many must die before the words are spoken. I mean to speak them sooner if I can." Corlys rose as well, joints popping faintly. Age had crept upon the sea snake while the realm bled, but there was iron still in his spine. "I have sailed seas most men only know from maps," he said. "I have watched storms break ships that thought themselves unsinkable, while smaller, humbler craft rode out the waves. The Queen speaks truth whether we like it or not. We are not the storm we were. If we are to weather what comes, we must learn new ways." "We are Targaryens," Celtigar said sharply. "We do not bend. Others bend to us." "We are Targaryens," Corlys countered. "And Velaryons and Celtigars and Starks and Lannisters and all the rest. The dragons do not care whose name sits a throne. The winter that will come after us will not care. We have burned enough bridges between our houses." An odd silence fell. Even Alfred Broom frowned as if weighing a new thought. Rhaenyra let it settle before speaking again. "Aegon will come," she said. "He will kneel or he will not. If he does not, then all your fire will be needed. I will not go unprotected into his embrace. He will be surrounded by my guards, watched by my eyes, his every step measured." She looked to Corlys and saw understanding there. "I will also not judge him alone," she said. "When he confesses, it will not be to me only, but to the realm, to lords from both sides, to men who watched this war tear their lands in half. I will not let anyone say later that this was some trick played in a smoky chamber out of sight. This war has been fought in the open. It will end there." "You mean for some great council?" Celtigar said warily. "Of a sort," Rhaenyra said. "A reckoning, not just for him, for all of us." Their unease deepened at that, but she did not soften it. They were not wrong to fear knives turned toward their own throats. They had ordered killings in dark alleys and on windswept battlements. So had she. But if this golden age she dared to imagine was to be more than a comforting lie, it could not rest only on the bones of the defeated. It had to examine what her side had done as well as his. Later, alone with Corlys in the quiet of the smaller council chamber, she spread maps across the table and looked at the blotched, ink-stained surface as if it might offer her absolution. "You support this," she said. It was not quite a question. Corlys rested his hands on the table's edge, fingers splayed. "I support an end," he said. "I am old, Rhaenyra. I would like to see my grandchildren grow into something other than weapons. Laena's sons, Lena's girls, Baela and Rhaena. They deserve a world where their dragons are not always being weighed against someone else's." "And Jace?" she asked softly. "Luke? Joffrey? They deserved it too," Corlys said, voice roughening. "The dead are owed justice. The living are owed mercy. Sometimes they must be taken in the same hand." She looked at him. "You have lost as much as I have, perhaps more, and yet you do not cry for Aegon's blood." "Oh, I do," he said, and his eyes flashed. "There are nights when I lie awake and imagine drifting Sunfire's scorched skull through the gullet on a raft, a warning to every would-be king. But I also lie awake counting ships and dragons and men. We are running out of them all. There will be no trade left to ply if we keep burning our customers." Despite herself, a small, tired smile touched her lips. "Always the trader," she said. "Always the sailor," he replied. "We learn early that the sea does not care for pride, only preparation. This new thing you reach for, it smells like preparation, for a world where dragons are not enough." She traced the line of the narrow sea with a fingertip. "The maesters say dragons are waning," she said quietly. "That they do not grow as they once did, do not clutch as often. Some call it nonsense. Others whisper that the doom never truly ended, that the magic that birthed us all is guttering." "You believe them?" Corlys asked. "I believe what I see," she said. "There were far more dragons when my grandsire crossed than there are now. Far more when my father was a boy than when I was. Now, look at what the dance has cost us. Malays, Caraxes, Vagr, Vermithor, too many names to speak without choking. If we keep using them as swords in our quarrels, soon there will be none left." "And if there are none left?" Corlys asked quietly. She met his gaze. "Then we must be something other than conquerors," she said. "Or the realm will devour us." He studied her for a time. "You sound like your father in his better moments," he said. "I sound like a woman who has seen too many burned fields," she replied. "Help me, Lord Corlys. I have won a crown at last, but it sits on a broken realm. I need ships to knit it back together. I need gold to feed hungry mouths. I need wise men to sit in council who can think beyond the next boast in a tavern." He bowed slightly, the motion stiff but sincere. "As long as I draw breath, my ships are yours," he said. "And my counsel, though I cannot promise you will like it." "I do not need to like it," she said. "Only to hear it." When Aegon's fleet finally anchored in the shadow of Dragonstone, the sky was clear and cold. No mists shrouded the black cliffs. No fog softened the jagged outline of towers against the blue. It was as if the island wished to bear witness, stark and undeniable. Aegon came ashore in a plain black cloak over his gilded breastplate, his crown absent. Around him walked 100 men, no more, their weapons left aboard the ships. Rhaenyra's guards watched them with hands near sword hilts, but no blades were drawn. On the beach where once she had played as a child, collecting shells and daring the waves to soak her skirts, Rhaenyra waited in full regalia. Her crown, shaped like a slender circlet of black iron and dragon heads, gleamed in the pale light. Her cloak was crimson, her gown midnight, her long braids streaked with silver at the temples now. Syrax lay behind her on the rocks like a mountain of gold, eyes half closed. The dragon's presence was as much a message as any raven. I am here. I am watching, but I do not need to kill you. Between them stood an array of lords and knights. Corlys Velaryon, Jason Lannister, Gwaine Hightower, black and green both. Men who had lost kin to the other's cause now stood shoulder to shoulder, faces set. A wooden platform had been raised, simple and unadorned, with a single iron anvil placed upon it. Beside it rested a great warhammer, its head dark with use. Rhaenyra had chosen it deliberately. Aegon halted a dozen paces from her, looking up at the looming bulk of the castle. His face was pale, but his chin held stubbornly high. Dragonstone, he said. I always thought it would be larger. You saw it from the sea as a child, Rhaenyra said, and drunk from the windows of the Red Keep later. Things look smaller when you are certain you own them. His mouth twitched. Do you mean to trade japes until we grow old? He asked. Or shall we get on with my humiliation? She inclined her head toward the platform. You know why you are here, she said. Not for me, for them. Her gaze swept the gathered lords, the watching soldiers, the servants lined along the edges of the makeshift field. For once, there were no small folk. This was not King's Landing. Dragonstone had end. A teeming city pressed against its walls. But news would spread from these lips, and she had ensured the mouths were many and varied. Let them hear you, she said to Aegon. Let them see, so they cannot pretend later this never happened. His jaw clenched. And if I refuse? He asked, almost lightly. I will have wasted a great deal of carpentry, she replied. And then I will find some less pleasant way to end this. He snorted. Threats suit you better than peace talk, sister. Perhaps, she said. Yet here we stand. They mounted the platform together, the wood creaking beneath their boots. At a gesture from Rhaenyra, a herald stepped forward, unrolling a parchment and reading in a ringing, formal voice. Let it be known that on this day, before lords of the Seven Kingdoms and the last living dragons of Valyria, Aegon, second of his name, does lay down his crown and confess his usurpation of the Iron Throne, with eyes open and will unbound, that peace may return to the realm. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some of the green lords looked as if they had swallowed something sour. Some of the black looked grimly satisfied. Jason Lannister's mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. Gwaine Hightower's jaw was a white line. Aegon stepped up to the anvil. The warhammer waited beside it, heavy and unlovely. He picked it up with both hands, testing its weight. I thought you would have me break swords, he muttered. A neat bit of theater. The swords are already broken, Rhaenyra said quietly. What needs breaking is the notion that crowns grow from nothing but blood. He looked at her sidelong. You did not always speak so, he said. I have not always seen what I have seen now, she replied. He shrugged once, as if something in him loosened. Then he raised his voice, addressing not her but the crowd. I am Aegon Targaryen, he said, called the second by those who would flatter me, called worse by many others. I sat the Iron Throne in King's Landing crowned by the High Septon and anointed in the sight of gods and men. I splintered this realm in my greed and fear. I called my sister a liar, a whore, a pretender. I spoke oaths with one hand and broke them with the other. I sent men to their deaths for my pride. His voice carried, sweeping over the silent assembly like a wash of cold water. I did these things, he said. No one forced me, no one tricked me. My grandsire may have whispered, my mother may have wept, my lords may have urged, but in the end my hand signed those orders. My mouth gave those commands. I own them. He lifted the warhammer high. This crown, he said, glancing back toward the red keep that lay unseen beyond horizon and sea, was not mine by right. My father chose another. I stole it. I let men flatter me into thinking I was owed what was never promised. I have paid and made others pay for that crime. With a sharp breath, he brought the hammer down. The blow rang out like thunder. The iron circlet on the anvil buckled, flattened, split. Jewels popped from their settings, skittering across the wood like spilled teeth. The crown that had once gleamed on his brow became a twisted, mangled thing. Gasps answered the sound. Even those who had whispered for his yielding now stared as if they had seen a part of their world end. Aegon let the hammer fall with a thud. I confess my usurpation, he said. I renounce all claim to the Iron Throne, to the style of king, to any title that sets me above the queen I wronged. Before gods and men, before dragons and men who feed them, I bend my knee. He turned, knelt, and bowed his head. The moment stretched. Rhaenyra had prepared herself for it in sleepless hours, imagining how it would feel. She had thought she would be exultant, vindicated, reveling in the sight of the brother who had stolen her life bound beneath her gaze. Instead, she felt only a vast, aching tiredness. The sound of the waves on the shore drowned the murmurs of the watching lords. The wind tugged at her cloak. Syrax's breath rumbled faintly behind her, warm against her back like the beat of some old, familiar heart. Rise, she said at last. Her voice did not ring. It did not need to. Aegon of House Targaryen, no more my rival, soon no more my subject. He looked up, wary. Then what am I? He asked. A man about to take the black, she said, and pray he finds some peace in snow that he never had in silk. As she spoke, men of the Night's Watch stepped forward. A thin, ragged group, black cloaks patched and mended. They had come south under guard when her raven reached Castle Black, uncertain what welcome they would find amid the ashes of war. Now they looked as bewildered as any. This realm has bled enough, she said, addressing all gathered. From this day forth, no man or woman shall hold a crown in defiance of the line set down by Viserys Targaryen. No council of lords, no whisper of septs, no ambition of grandsires will alter the succession of my house without consent of the one who sits the throne. We have seen what comes of lords playing at kingship. It ends in fire. She let her gaze rest briefly on Jason Lannister, on Gwaine Hightower, on others whose hands had moved puppet strings that led to dragon's jaws. But fire alone will not hold this realm together, she went on. We will not forget what was done in this war. There will be trials, for green and black both, for men who ordered massacres and men who slaughtered children in alleys, for maesters who falsified accounts and septons who used their pulpits as weapons. We will look at ourselves in the clear light of day and not flinch from what we have become. Uneasy shifting met that, yet in some eyes she saw something like grim approval. Men who had buried sons had little patience left for the notion that great lords' crimes should vanish beneath velvet. At the end of those trials, Rhaenyra said, there will be punishments, and there will be pardons. And when they are done, we will put down our swords and begin the harder work, building a realm that does not tear itself apart each time a king grows weak. She looked down at Aegon, still kneeling. You will go to the wall, she said. You will guard the realms of men. If you return south without leave of the Lord Commander, you will be outlaw, your life forfeit. If any man tries to raise your banner in rebellion, let it be known that you will not stand behind it. He nodded slowly. Better cold walls than hot blades, he muttered. Perhaps I will learn to like snow. Do, she said. It will be your only companion for a long time." She offered him her hand. The gesture shocked them all more than any hammer blow. Even Aegon stared as if she had sprouted a second head. Slowly, he took it. Her fingers closed around his, rough and calloused. She pulled him to his feet. "Go with the watch," she said. "Serve. Perhaps one day, when I am bones beneath the Red Keep, some singer will tell a tale of a king who found honor in black instead of gold. Stranger things have happened." He gave a brittle, humorless laugh. "You think anyone will sing of me? Men love a fallen king," she said dryly. "They forgive much of those who lose. It makes them feel better about their own failures." He studied her face, as if looking for the girl he had once raced through the halls of the Red Keep, hiding from Septa Marlowe's cane. "You have changed," he said. "So have you," she replied. "Try to change more. It might suit you." He went down the steps between the black-cloaked men. The crowd parted around them like water around a ship's prow, some making signs of the seven, some spitting, some looking on with empty eyes. Rhaenyra stood on the platform, watching until Aegon's back vanished into the press. She did not feel triumph. She felt unexpectedly an opening. A door cracked in a wall she had once thought unbreakable. Behind her, Syrax rumbled softly. "We are not done," she murmured to the dragon. "Not by half." Syrax's mind brushed hers, hot and ancient. Not words, but something like a scent. Rhaenyra Targaryen began her reign in truth that day. The years that followed were not easy. No golden age is polished in an instant. It is hammered on an anvil of compromise and fear and stubborn hope. The trials were the hardest part. She insisted they be held in King's Landing, not Dragonstone. The city that had seen the worst of the war would see its accounting. The small folk, whose lives had been ground beneath dragons' talons, would watch as high lords stood in chains. They did not try everyone. It would have been impossible. The war's crimes were too many, its blood too widespread. Instead, Rhaenyra chose the worst offenders. Men who had ordered the murder of children, as in the tragedy of Blood and Cheese. Men who had presided over mass hangings of prisoners. Men who had raped under color of war. She chose them from black and green both. Many of her own counselors balked. "You will weaken yourself," Lord Celtigar warned. "If you let the realm see your own men judged, they will think you soft. Or worse, they will forget who won. They will know I intend to rule, not feed old grudges," Rhaenyra replied. "If I only punish the Greens, their kin will never forgive, and their hatred will fester. If I only punish the Blacks, I might as well step down now and crown Old Town's Septon in my place." Some of the Black Lords never forgave her. When Ser Luther Largent, the towering knight of the Gold Cloaks who had overseen brutal crackdowns in her name, stood before the throne and heard sentence of death, his shock was plain. "I killed at your command," he said. "You killed beyond it," Rhaenyra answered. "You took pleasure where duty demanded none. You hanged men whose guilt was unproven because it made the city quiet. We cannot keep peace by murdering it." He spat at her feet. "You will not hold this chair 10 years, he said. "You are cutting your own legs out from under you." "Perhaps," she said. "Or perhaps I am cutting away rotted flesh so that something may heal." He went to the block cursing her name. Others followed, from Old Town and Highgarden and Harrenhal both. Not all were executed. Some were confined to monastic orders, sent to serve in remote septs or on windswept islands. Some were stripped of titles but left their lives. Some, whose guilt was murkier, were fined heavily. Their coin turned to rebuilding burned villages and repairing roads torn by war. The Septons howled at first, protesting her demand that crimes cloaked in piety be brought into the light. Some threatened excommunication. Rhaenyra responded by inviting the High Septon himself to sit in on the trials, to question witnesses, to condemn what he saw. "You wish to show me your sins?" he asked. "To parade them like penitent flagellants? I wish you to see that blood was spilled in your God's name for reasons that had naught to do with him," she replied. "So that when men come to your doors whispering of holy wars, You remember the stench of this one. In the end, the High Septon came. He sat in his starry crown beneath the Iron Throne and wept openly when he heard some of the testimonies. His presence lent the proceedings a weight they would not otherwise have had. It also bound the faith, however reluctantly, to the new order Rhaenyra was trying to forge. Some lords whispered that this openness was weakness. Others, especially those whose lands had been hardest hit, felt a prick of something like grudging respect. In the north, word reached Winterfell that the Queen had sent men of her own house to answer for their crimes. When Lord Cregan Stark finally marched south with a host, months after the trials began, it was not to stage an hour of the wolf but to stand, frost-eyed and unsmiling, at Rhaenyra's side as she delivered the last of the sentences. "You have done what you set out to do," he said afterward, alone. With her in the echoing throne room. "You have shown yourself willing to cut your own flesh as well as others. The North respects that." "I have cut too much flesh," she said wearily. "I would rather knit it now if I can." He studied her with that stark stillness that made people mistake restraint for simplicity. "You will need more than justice to bind this realm," he said. "Justice cools anger, perhaps. It does not fill empty bellies. It does not stop next winter." "I know," she said. "Will the North stand with me when I ask for grain to be sent south? Workmen, to rebuild bridges and holds?" He frowned faintly. "You would ask the coldest land for grain?" he said. "Strange. I would ask every land for what it can best give," she said. "The Reach has grain, yes, but its fields are trampled and burned. The riverlands are a flooded graveyard. Dorne answers to its own rhythms. The North has stores, and steel, and men who know how to endure. When famine comes again, I would have your example to point to." He considered that for a time. "You place weight on examples," he said. "On words. My grandsire would have called you a dreamer." "My father was called worse," she answered. "But his dreaming was aimless. He let others steer while he stared at clouds. I mean to dream with my hands on the rudder." Unexpectedly, a corner of Cregan's mouth twitched. "I like that," he said. "Very well, Your Grace. The North will send what it can. But know this, we do not kneel quickly. If you begin to resemble your brother, we will remember how to stand." "Good," she said. "I would rather have lords who think than ones who lick my boots." He bowed, as much as Starks ever did, and returned to his cold stronghold in the snow. Rhaenyra took that as a victory. She moved the court intermittently, refusing to let King's Landing become the sole axis of power. For part of each year, she held court in Old Town, forcing the Hightowers to look her in the eye as she confirmed or revoked their privileges. For another part, she traveled east to Driftmark or west to Lannisport, making progress through her shattered realm like a general surveying a battlefield after the smoke has cleared. She brought her children with her. Aegon the Younger, now simply Prince Aegon, not the third of anything yet, rode beside her, silent and haunted, the shadow of his dragon Stormcloud's last flight still in his two old eyes. Viserys, recovered from his captivity in Lys and reunited with his mother at last, spoke more, asking endless questions about how castles were built, how ships stayed afloat, how dragons dreamed. Joffrey, the youngest of that first brood, grew into a thoughtful, uncertain boy, always watching his mother with a mixture of admiration and fear. She needed them. She needed their future to justify the cost of her past. In Old Town, she walked the Citadel's halls and saw the skepticism in Maester's eyes. They had always distrusted dragons, preferring ink and logic to flame. She did not try to charm them. Instead, she established a new office. The kings, she insisted on queens, they insisted on kings. Eventually, she let the distinction drop in favor of getting things done. Astronomer and the queen's lorekeeper, positions drawn from the citadel but answerable to the throne. "You will record truths, not flattering lies," she told the gray men who accepted. "When I err, I expect to see the record of it in your books. When lords overreach, I expect it noted, so that in 100 years some other queen can read and say, here is where the rot began last time. We will not repeat it." They were disturbed by this notion, but also fascinated. Maesters loved to believe themselves above the fray. Being invited to set it down openly appealed to their sense of importance. She did not stop there. In King's Landing, she ordered the shattered dragon pit rebuilt, but not as it had been. No longer a tomb for caged dragons, forced to live in dark and die for men's amusement. Instead, it became a place of study and reverence. Its central floor open to the sky, its walls lined with carved reliefs of dragons flying free over fields and cities. "We will not pen them like beasts in a fighting pit," she said. "If dragons live alongside us, they must be treated as something more, or they will go the way of all abused creatures." Her dragon keepers balked. So did some of the old Valyrian families who had clung to the notion that dragons existed solely to be ridden into battle. "Dragons are weapons," one protested. "Nothing more, nothing less. They were made for war. That is their glory." "Glory has given us graveyards," Rhaenyra replied. "I will not deny their nature. Dragons are fire, and fire is dangerous. But we are perilous, too, with our swords and our tempers. We do not shackle every lord in chains because he might start a war. We give him reason not to. We will do the same for dragons." She ordered a cadre of dragon priests established, men and women who studied the creatures, learning their moods and habits, charting their flights, cataloging what seemed to anger or calm them. It smacked of superstition to some, but to Rhaenyra it was simple prudence. "If dragons are fading, we should know why," she told the maesters. "If they are not, we should know how to live beside them without destroying ourselves." Some dragons left anyway. Sheepstealer vanished beyond the wall with nettles, and no one saw them again in the Seven Kingdoms. Silverwing took to ranging farther and farther from her lairs, sometimes vanishing for months. Morning, young and bright, grew skittish, taking to the clouds whenever crowds pressed too close. Rhaenyra watched them go with a mixture of sorrow and grim satisfaction. They were not hers to chain. Perhaps, somewhere beyond the familiar edges of the map, they would find places where men did not try to use them as crowns. Closer to home, she focused on things dragons could not fix: food, roads, laws. She ordered a great road built from King's Landing to Winterfell, wider and better paved than the old King's roads, with way stations where travelers could find shelter and food under crown protection. She levied fees not only on trade passing through but on those who abused the peace of the road, making it a crime punishable by death to prey on travelers there. "That is a rope in search of necks," Jason Lannister said dryly when the edict came before him in council. "It is a rope that will catch yours if your men begin shaking down merchants," Rhaenyra replied. "The realm will have one place where the crown's justice is swift and certain. Let it be a road. Perhaps the notion will spread." Did slowly. Merchants began to trust the route. Inns flourished. News traveled faster than ravens. When winter snows came heavy in some regions, grain collected along the road made its way south or north as needed. In the Riverlands, she granted charters to small councils of village elders, giving them authority to settle local disputes without always appealing to distant lords. In Dorne, she acknowledged Martell independence in all but name, exchanging their promise of non-aggression and trade for an end to endless border skirmishes. "You give up territory," Corlys warned. "I give up the illusion of control over land we have never truly held," she said. "In return, I gain peace on a border that has bled for 2 centuries, counting that a loss is a particular sort of arithmetic I do not share." She did not neglect the Reach or the Westerlands, though resentment there lingered longest. She reduced some of their more egregious privileges: Hightower tithes on certain trade, Lannister exemptions from some crown taxes. In their place, she granted honors that appealed to pride without draining coin. Honorary commands, new orders of merit for road building and harbor dredging. "Give lions stone to carve," she murmured to Corlys, watching Jason Lannister preen at a ceremony inaugurating a new breakwater in Lannisport. "They will spend less time sharpening their claws on you." Through it all, the presence of dragons in the sky kept Lord's worst ambitions in check. But it was the webs of law and habit and mutual interest that held things together underneath. It was not flawless. There were rebellions. A minor lord in the Vale who refused to accept the new courts. A rich man who tried to claim his cousin's lands by force in defiance of the Queen's edicts. Even a brief uprising in Old Town led by a rabble-rousing septon who preached that any rule with dragons was proof of the gods' displeasure. Rhaenyra put them down when she had to, with soldiers and occasionally with dragons. But each time, she tried to be sure that when the smoke cleared, what remained was stronger than what had been before. Her children grew into this uneasy peace. Aegon, who had once flinched at the sight of Syrax's shadow, learned to ride again. Not a dragon, Stormcloud's death had scarred him too deep, but a great black stallion too spirited for lesser riders. He took to patrolling the roads, not as a prince surrounded by fanfare, but as a quiet figure in half-plate, watching for brigands and corrupt crown officials. "They will not know you," Rhaenyra said when she first heard of it, half amused, half concerned. "That is the point," he replied. "They speak more freely to a stranger. I hear things in taverns I never would in your hall." She saw then the king he might yet become. Not her father, drifting in dreams, nor her brother, drunk on easy flattery, but a man who walked among his people with his eyes open. Viserys took to the citadel for a time, much to the maester's consternation. A prince in grey robes, blowing dust off old Valyrian scrolls, asking pointed questions about dragon lore and the histories of the free cities. "They kept knowledge from us?" he told his mother, firelight glinting in his dark eyes. "Not just about dragons, about the doom. About what their order did and did not do when it happened. There are gaps in their records, torn pages, missing volumes. It smells of fear. Keep digging," she said, "politely if you can, less so if you must." Joffrey, to her surprise, fell in love with ships. Corlys took him under his wing, teaching him to read currents and winds, to judge a hull's lines at a glance. The boy grew into a tall, lean man who could move as easily on a tilting deck as in a stable yard. "I want to see the world beyond our maps," he said once, eyes bright. "To sail east of east, west of west. Just do not bring home a war," Rhaenyra said dryly. "We have had enough of those." "I will bring home stories," he promised, "and perhaps new trade, if the gods are kind." She had never cared much for the gods, but for once, she found herself hoping they listened. Years slipped by, scars faded on the city's stones. Children grew up who knew the dance only as a cautionary tale, not as a daily terror. Bards began to compose songs about the queen who made lords answer for their crimes as often as about the dragons that had fought above the god's eye. Aegon the Elder's letters reached her occasionally from the wall, carried south by the periodic recruitment parties. He wrote of cold, of endless stone and snow, of wildlings with painted faces and eyes like chips of flint. He wrote of the first time he stood on the wall and saw the forest stretching north, endless and dark. "I thought of dragons," he wrote once, "not as weapons but as guardians. How differently our house might have lived if we had perched our dragons on this barrier instead of the Red Keep. Men are small up here. All our quarrels are small. The snow does not care who sat which throne. He never asked to come south. She never offered." When word came, 15 years into her reign, that Aegon the Elder had died in his sleep at Castle Black, she read the letter in silence and then burned it, scattering the ashes into the embrasure. "Farewell, brother," she murmured. "You were not the king I needed you to be. You became, perhaps, the man you should have been." She ordered a modest marble plaque placed in the Red Keep's sept, bearing his name and the simple words, "He served." No more, no less. In the end, what made her reign golden was not a single act, nor a single victory, but the accumulation of such choices. The quiet, relentless insistence that the realm could be more than a stage for Dragon Lord's pride. There were still wars, raiders from the Stepstones, disputes with the Iron Islands, a brief conflict with bravos over debts incurred before her time. There were still famines in harsh winters and plagues in crowded cities. Yet each time, The realm responded not with panic scrambles for advantage, but with something like coordinated effort. Grain flowed along the roads she had built. Ships carried aid to stricken ports. Lords who had once eyed one another's misfortunes with greedy calculation now understood that their prosperity rode on the same winds. Maesters would later argue, in careful parchment and candlelit debates, about when exactly the Golden Age began. Some said it was the moment Aegon's crown shattered. Others pointed to the day the first caravan traveled the new King's Road from Winterfell to King's Landing without incident. Some, romantic sorts, named the night when a girl born in Flea Bottom danced in a square beneath a dragon's shadow and did not flee in fear. Rhaenyra herself, in her last days, would have said it began earlier. It began, she thought, the moment she chose not to burn that fleet. Old now, her hair more silver than gold, she sat in the garden overlooking the city she had nearly ruined and helped rebuild. The air smelled of lemon blossoms and distant smoke. Children laughed somewhere beyond the hedges, chasing one another under the watchful eyes of septas and sworn shields. Aegon, her heir, tall and broad-shouldered, came to sit beside her. He looked more like her father than her brothers now, though his eyes were his own, clear, steady, with a hint of the steel the realm had needed. The council finished, he said. They agreed to the new charters for the Dornish marches, with much grumbling. Lords grumble when their privileges are threatened, she said. If they are grumbling, you are likely doing something right. He smiled faintly. I feel like I spend half my days taking from some to give to others, he said. They call it justice when they benefit, tyranny when they do not. Welcome to ruling, she replied dryly. It never ends. He was quiet for a time, watching the sun slip lower, gilding the city's rooftops. Dragons wheeled high above, smaller now than the giants of her youth but still glorious, their shadows passing like omens over the sprawl of King's Landing. Mother, he said at last, do you ever regret not burning them? On the sea, Aegon, the fleet. If you had, perhaps we would have had fewer quarrels, fewer lords to appease. She thought of that day, of Sunfire's blaze directed not at her but at the scorpions, of Aegon's face as he watched his crown flatten under the hammer, of the choice she had made in the sky. I regret many things, she said slowly. I regret not seeing sooner what our war was doing to those beneath us. I regret the choices that led my sons to their deaths. I regret listening to men who valued their pride more than my peace. She shook her head. But I do not regret that, she said. That was the first time I chose the realm over my vengeance. Had I chosen otherwise, I would have been stronger for a season and weaker forever. We would have taught the realm that no oath, no parley, no promise mattered. Only fire. Once you set that lesson, it is hard to unteach. He nodded, absorbing that. I have wondered, he said, if you had died in the dance, as some say you did in other tales, what would the realm be now? She smiled faintly. Full of poets with grand stories of dragons devouring queens, she said. Empty of roads and courts and all the dull things that keep a realm alive. He chuckled. You have never been dull. Oh, I assure you, she said. Signing petitions for drainage ditches can be very dull, but necessary. Remember that, Aegon, the realm is not made in battles. It is made in ditches and roads and quiet verdicts. He took her hand, age-spotted and thin now, in his. I will remember, he said. I have watched you long enough. She squeezed his fingers. Then perhaps, she murmured, this golden age will outlive me. He said nothing, but his grasp tightened. Above them, a young dragon screamed in exhilaration as it stooped toward the sea, then climbed again, water streaming from its scales like diamonds. On the docks below, men shouted and waved instead of running in terror. Rhaenyra watched the dragon, watched the city, watched her son. Her chest ached. Not with pain, though there was some of that, but with a strange, fierce contentment. We have not wasted it, she thought. All that blood, all that sorrow. We have not wasted it entirely. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of salt and smoke and life. She closed her eyes and, just for a moment, saw her father sitting his throne, eyes soft with dreams. She saw Daemon laughing in the saddle, hair streaming as car axes plunged. She saw Jace and Luke and Tiny Joff playing at nights with wooden swords in the Red Keep yard. "I did what I could," she told them silently. "It was not enough to bring you back, but perhaps it was enough that others will not follow." When the end came for Rhaenyra Targaryen, it came not in dragonflame or on some windswept battlefield, but quietly, in her sleep, under blankets that smelled faintly of cedar and lemon. She did not feel the moment her breath ceased. The realm she left behind did. In the years that followed, men and women would argue over her legacy. Some would curse her as the woman who broke old certainties, who made lords answer for crimes they had once committed with impunity. Some would praise her as the queen who ended the dance without a final orgy of blood, who bound dragons to roads and dukes to laws. Songs would be sung of her counsel with Cregan Stark, of the trials, of the day Aegon the Elder broke his crown. Children would act out the scene of the shattered circlet, smashing pots in their mother's kitchens until they were cuffed away. Others, quieter, would remember different things. The first time a border dispute was settled in a village court instead of with torches. The first time grain arrived in a starving winter from a land that had no obligation but shared anyway, because the queen had insisted on such bonds. The first time a dragon flew overhead and no one screamed, only shaded their eyes and watched in awe. Whatever else was said, one thing was clear. There had been a time before Rhaenyra, when dragons were crowns and crowns were fire. And there was the time after, when dragons were still fearsome, still wild, but the realm beneath them had learned a new dance. Not of blazing skies and shattering towers, but of roads and courts and dangerously simple ideas. That a queen could be made by law as well as by might, that justice could reach high and low alike, that peace was not merely the absence of war but the presence of something built deliberately, day by weary day. In that balance of flame and parchment, of wing and stone, of pride and choice, the golden age of the Targaryens took root. It began when a queen at last chose not to burn her brother, and from that single stayed hand, an entire future unfolded.